clay surface is quite firm and may be crossed with a heavy truck. The chemical works and townships have been developed along the modern lines on the western shore of the lake. This plant now supports the population of Chandler, numbering 350 people. Calcination through this kiln is done at a temperature of 800 degrees centigrade. After roasting, the calcination passes through a cooler, the material to be dried, and the hot gas passes through in the same direction. The dried potash pours into a small hammer mill,
One of the sources for this video labels Chandler as Western Australia's first chemical town. Located in the central Wheatbelt, about 300 kilometres east of Perth, numerous concrete remains can be found on the edge of Lake Chandler. These were once a busy production plant and adjoining company town. Chandler was significant because of its contribution to the war effort in the 1940s. Its specific contribution? Potash. Yes, the very same you used to help grow your tomatoes. Even the supply of potash was affected by World War II. When Japan invaded the island nation of Nauru, we lost our main source. Other international imports had also been cut off. With the fertilisation of our crops impacted, the state government scrambled to secure a local supply. Luckily, there was a place near the town of Nungarin, which just so happened to include an ordnance supply depot during the war. With the supply chain secured, work could begin on the town and plant. This salt lake supposedly held 100 years worth of potash for the entire nation, so what happened? The town was named after a Campion farmer named James Chandler, who made the initial discovery of alunite in the lake, which is what potash is extracted from. In 1924, he submitted a sample of powdery material from the lake for analysis. This sample, it turns out, was 50% alunite. Further exploration of the lake found alunite deposits 8 feet deep, the most extensive in the world, and supposedly the only place where it occurs on a lake surface. The Western Australian Mines Department sampled to a depth of 1 metre and estimated there was an alunite reserve of 2 million tonnes. At the time, potash was essential for the local growth of tomatoes, potatoes and sugarcane. Since there was the advantage of easily collecting the alunite from the dry lake surface, several interested parties attempted to set up operations even before the war. However, they couldn't figure out how to make the operation financially viable. In 1942, a private syndicate and the local government joined forces to investigate the deposit and build a plant. This time around, surveys indicated the deposit could contain 10 million tonnes of alunite clay, which would be the largest in the world. Chandler was built because of World War II, but also suffered due to it thanks to shortages of labour and equipment. Because new material for construction was in short supply, the planners had to be a bit scrappy. As such, machinery and steel were obtained from abandoned mining towns up north. Members of the syndicate were also financially disadvantaged by Japan's entry into the war. Since potash was so urgently needed, the government agreed to fund the operation. The plant was completed in 1943, with trials commencing later that year and early 1944. Output was much lower than expected due to inefficiencies in the production process. They expected 210 tonnes per month, but the throughput only produced 38 tonnes. This was caused by inefficient gas producers, which led to temperature control issues, corrosion troubles, and a kiln not fit for purpose. That was second-hand and intended for cement. Supposedly, it was the only one of that size available in Australia. Modifications were made, and the output increased to 114 tonnes per month. This included the design and manufacture of a continuous leaching machine. This was claimed to be the only one in existence at the time, at least according to the government report I read anyway. Still, the potash produced only had 30% potassium oxide. I won't pretend to understand why that's important, but imported potash was usually 60%. This restricted what type of fertilizer it could be used in. The report goes on to list what the plant can improve to bring it up to 50% over a 15-month period. But considering how the story goes, I'm unsure if any of those recommendations were implemented. The plant was known as the State Alunite Industry and formally opened January 1944. I won't go into deep detail about how it operated, but drag lines were used to gather the material from the lake, which was then transported by truck to a hammer mill. After being crushed, it was roasted in the kiln. I found a great video online through the State Library about the process if you'd like to know more. You can find it listed in my sources. To coincide with the plant's development, land for a town site was set aside in 1942 and gazetted February 1943. For reasons unknown to me, the town was surveyed further south of the lake and plant, but was instead built across the road. 40 houses were transported from mine towns and reconstructed, including from the town of Yuanmi, where the gold mine had closed. That was over 400 kilometers away. As such, maintenance was a constant issue. No one purchased these houses at least. They were all rented from the government. 17 houses were also newly built, with an additional 10 to 15 single men's huts that included an ablutions block and a canteen. Water wasn't an issue as it was piped in from the Goldfields water supply scheme. After the Campion Dam failed, local farmers also relied on it for a public standpipe. By November 1944, the population of Chandler was 160, with 50 of those being children. The population would eventually peak at between 250 and 330 by the end of the war, with all the adults being government employees. No one moved there for any sort of permanency. The pay was good, so many left once they had saved enough to buy vacant perf. But having said that, many still made it homely, and there appeared to be a great sense of community. Thanks to the town being situated in a saucer-shaped depression, Chandler was stifling hot in the summer and cold and windy in the winter. But thanks to the steady water supply, many homes had established gardens. These included lawns, veggie patches, and other plants not native to the area. I wish I had some good photos to show. Community events included dances, sports, and other gatherings run by the school and church. There was also a lot of cycling and golf, along with a tennis club. Good radio reception and a telephone exchange also made living there less isolating. The teacher also used a projector to screen TV shows and movies in the evenings. Speaking of the school, it was originally held in the town hall until a schoolhouse was transferred from Campion. Chandler also included a powerhouse, an unofficial post office that ran mail from Meriden, a library, a branch of the CWA, a bank, a butcher, and what was called a gallon license, which was essentially a bottle shop. There was also a small grocery shop in town, but fresh bread, milk, meat and ice were also delivered from Meriden 3 times a week. Once fully built, the town was spread over 2 boulevards and included about 70 buildings. I want to quickly interject by announcing my new channel, Brendan Goes Outside. This will primarily include hiking and camping, but also plenty of history and other stories relating to the locations. It's my goal to make walking through the bush as entertaining as possible. Please find it linked in the description. There's 5 videos out so far. I put it out there that I was hoping to reach 1,000 subscribers by the year's end in the Barracks Arch video, and that's exactly what's happened. So thank you to everyone who's checked it out so far and left encouraging comments. But otherwise, thanks for listening, and let's now return to the story of Chandler. Once the war was over, international trade resumed and then ramped up. Cheaper and higher quality potash was again available from places like France. As such, the plant couldn't compete and closed February 1950. Only 9,000 tonnes of potash were produced over its 6-year lifespan, which was extracted from 182,000 tonnes of material. It says a lot about the efficiencies of the plant, if it was still cheaper to import from abroad by this point. But even though it wasn't the smoothest operation and made no profit, the plant was still necessary because of the war. The fact is, without it, there would have been no potash whatsoever. This would have had a devastating impact on the local agricultural industry. The production facility closed, but it wasn't to be the end for Chandler. A post-war housing boom had created a shortage of plasterboard. This is produced from gypsum, of which there were large deposits about a mile down the road from Chandler. As such, the plant was converted to process that instead, and the town continued to run. While the plant was leased by Australian Plaster Industries, the government continued to service the town. This meant that those running the town continued to be government employees, while the plant workers were privately hired. Australian Plaster Industries also paid further royalties to the government for each tonne of plaster produced, of which they did 20,000 yearly. I don't have much insight into the town from this period. It appears to have been business as usual for the townfolk. But I did find a newspaper story about a truck crash from Chandler to Perth. Fred Wilkins was transporting 200 bags of plaster along Great Eastern Highway when his truck veered off Greenmount Hill and burst into flames. Fortunately for Fred, he managed to jump clear and wasn't hurt. The fire then ignited a drum of fuel, which reportedly flew 300 feet through the air. The gypsum operation only lasted until 1952. the demand for plasterboard dropped due to economic reasons and the plant was again closed. There were efforts to find another alternative use for the town site and plant, but instead, everything was put up for sale by tender. And I mean everything. An inventory of approximately 8,000 items was created for the big sell-off, with clothes and groceries from the general store auctioned off first. There were still shortages of materials this close to the end of the war, so the sale garnered lots of interest. Just about everything sold, including all the buildings and most of the plant equipment. Two of the biggest buildings sold for £450 each. These were originally obtained from the Nungarin depot during an army surplus sale at the end of the war. And after that, the town of Chandler, which had a lifespan of nearly a decade, was sold off to the highest bidder. The site would remain vacant for several decades, but had a third and final wind in 1975. It was discovered that the tailings from previous operations were quite absorbent. As such, an operation called Chandler Clay treated the tailings to create kitty litter. While the town site was not resurrected, the new factory employed 5 people and ran until 1988 when the supply was exhausted. At its peak, they were treating 30 to 40 tons of material each week. Today the site is again unused, but there are still business prospects regarding the large deposits of materials sitting in the lake. I found a website for Lake Chandler HBA. The website states that it aims to become the leading producer of high quality alumina, which is what HBA stands for. HBA is used in products such as lithium-ion batteries and LED lighting. It goes on to say that they plan to build a pilot plant to prove commercial viability. I personally saw nothing of the sort on my visit there in late September. The latest update on the website is also from November last year in the form of a shareholder circular. This was to inform shareholders of a meeting. There, they were holding a vote to re-register the company and become private. A lot of the language in the update goes over my head. It's just not a world I'm involved in. The document states that they originally wanted to be listed on the stock exchange, but couldn't raise enough capital to do so, and that they were hoping to instead be acquired, and that wouldn't happen unless they were a private company, or something like that. Feel free to read the document yourself, it's linked in the sources. Either way, considering that was over a year ago, maybe nothing is happening, but these sorts of projects can take years to get off the ground. In the meantime, Chandler is touted as an attraction to visit by the Shire of Nungarin. This is great, but it's a shame that losers use it as a dumping ground. It was particularly disappointing to discover what I think was asbestos. But regardless of all that, the road in is unsealed, but in great condition. Photos on the Shire's website show remains of some equipment, but unfortunately this was gone by my visit. Still, the concrete remains are quite impressive, and the lake is stunning. Across the road, the town's 2 boulevards are barely visible. You might not even realise you're walking down them. Through the scrub, you do eventually find remains of the town, but since it was all sold off, only the concrete remains. There were plenty of garden beds however, which was cool to see after reading about everyone's fantastic gardens. While Chandler is in the middle of nowhere, it's fairly close to the Eaglestone Rock campsite. We stayed out there to film this video, which was covered in a membership vlog, some of which close to home and only overnighters, while others span 3 or 4 days of filming. I'll also generally visit locations that I find interesting around their local areas, but aren't involved enough for full proper videos. The camping is thanks to a sleeping platform I built in my Forester. I also have a video where I build that. Otherwise, there's several recon missions I've brought the viewers along on, some on foot, others on bike. There's also a range of other behind the scenes videos that show how the gravy is made. The support program is just $3 a month and can be cancelled at any time. That $3 includes the extra content, shows your username at the end of the videos, and highlights any comments you might make. All money earned goes back into the production of future videos. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.